Well, welcome to the Wizard's Crystal Ball. I couldn't look into my crystal ball and see a better guest inside the ball today as my friend Dave Grening. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Pleasure to be here, Michael. Thanks for having me.
If I mean, most people in the racing industry, know who you are, but after the show, everybody's going to know who you are and how important you are to the industry. When I think of you, I think of you carrying the torch for somebody we both knew for many years, Joe Hirsch. And that's a compliment to you. Um, Joe Hirsch being the great writer, staff writer for the DRF, amongst other things he's done in his life. You've carried the torch and carried it very well, David.
Well, I appreciate that. I refuse any comparisons to Mr. Hirsch. He was a mentor, and he was as respected as anybody in the industry of any industry that I ever known. It was my honor to have worked with him and learned from him, and to consider himself a friend.
Did he teach you things? Like, did you, the two of you sit together and kind of impart some of his wisdom and knowledge to you?
I wouldn't say that specifically. He did open a few doors. I remember, like in when I first started, and I was at the Jersey paper, and he introduced me to Neil Drysdale, who had the favorite for the Kentucky Derby at the time in AP Indy. And I went. It was me, him, and Neil in the office at Churchill Downs, and I don't think that I would have got in there with just that audience without Joe being, escorting me in. So, and I think you gained a measure of respect from the interviewer or interviewee when you were with Joe. So if Joe gave you the seal, if I was in there that day, Neil was like, well, if Joe's bringing him in, this guy must be okay. And I developed a good relationship with Neil, even though he was a California guy and I was a New York guy. Our paths didn't cross all that frequently, but I think I gained a measure of respect from Neil just for the fact that Joe brought me in.
I remember in the latter parts of his career, no one worked harder than Joe Hirsch. I'd say you're part of a 1-1A entry with him because your work ethic and how hard you work is off the charts. But Joe, even the last days of his writing career, sitting in the back of the press box with his back towards us near the bathroom, to the left of the bathroom,
Mhm.
with his old typewriter. And he didn't have, his posture was bad by then. He was just a frail man, still producing tremendous work.
He did, and it was hard for him toward the latter stages to get the column done, but he did it. The fact that nobody's sits in that seat that you talk about is a testament to the respect that we've all had for Joe. And no one, I don't think anyone sat in that seat since he retired. And his nameplate is still there.
And a picture right on the wall, wasn't there? There's a photograph.
There used to be a picture, I believe, and now there's a picture of 3 years ago when they held the first Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. We took a photo of the media members who covered that, and now that hangs up like right to the left of where Joe's seat was. But there is a
So
lock on a cabinet there, and it's sort of like the vault. Like, what's in that? Like, nobody dares break the lock or find the key. Who you probably can't find the key, but they break the lock to see what's in that cabinet to the left of his desk. And maybe someday that'll happen, but hasn't happened yet.
I know a good lock picker. I'd like to know what's in that. I'd like to know what's in there. There's a lot of buried secrets. It's like
Oh, a lot of treasures.
it's like the great grandma Pinnell's restaurant that knows the ingredients to the sauce, how the
Right. Maybe
sauce is
that's in
made.
there. That might be in there. Joe is a connoisseur of all restaurants. That might actually where it be. That's where it might be kept.
I think we figured out a real secret here. You know that? It just took us less than 10 minutes to find Pinnell's great grandmother's recipe that Joe Hirsch had. Fantastic. Um, so Dave, like, there's a history to you, is a history to everybody. Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in central New Jersey.
Okay. What town?
Somerset is the name of the town.
Oh, do you
We'll talk
know?
exit between exits 9 and 10 as people that are probably, well, what exit? Everyone, that's the old Jersey joke, right? What exit
I,
are you off the turnpike? So I was between 9 and 10.
I went to boarding school in Somerset
Oh, okay.
at 10
Rutgers,
years old, 1 year,
Rutgers Prep.
Somerset Hills.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Somerset Hills.
Interesting.
1 year I'd like to forget. But I did clean out the kids there with a food scam and
There you go.
baseball card scam. So I did well financially.
Nice.
And I got kicked out of it's the only time I got kicked out of school at 10 years old. Me and my brother, the bag man. But did you like horse racing as a young kid?
I didn't. I was into sports, but not horse racing. There would be occasions when I was a little bit older, upper teens, and still in high school. My mom liked to gamble. She didn't necessarily was a big horse follower per se, but she did like to gamble. So we would take excursions up the turnpike to the Meadowlands, more so the Meadowlands than even Monmouth, and mostly standardbreds because the Star Ledger, which was the paper that we got, had a great handicapping Ray Brienza and had a great handicappers in that paper. And my mom would flip through the sports section and look, and if something caught her eye on a night where we could go up there, we'd drive up there, and I would probably play numbers, she would play names, and we'd walk out of there probably a little bit less a little bit less money than we did when we first got there. But I loved the Meadowlands. Was a fun place to go. They had good restaurants, and it was a fun atmosphere, and I did like that, but it didn't necessarily attract me to become a horse racing fan.
Usually it's the father that gets the kid involved. Was your father around? Was he there?
My parents split up when I was about 8 or 9. My mom did remarry, and he didn't mind gambling either. He was a numbers guy too. We'd always go up there, make sure he played the 1-3-3-1 daily double, and sometimes it would hit, sometimes it would hit good. That's why we were probably better at harness racing than thoroughbreds, because the inside post usually had the edge, right? So 1-3-3-1, I would throw in the 7 for luck, and if we hit a few, we hit a few. I do remember one time we went to the Meadowlands. It was There was at an umbrella giveaway, and it happened to coincidentally rain and we were walking out from the Meadowlands to our car, and the umbrella, as cheaply made as those usual giveaways are, kind of flew up, and I do remember it was one of the more expensive umbrellas that we ever purchased.
So about what age was this happening that you going with your mother to the Meadowlands?
I was probably 16, 17, and I don't think they didn't really check for ages in terms of, like, you go sit down on the Pegasus, as long as you didn't bet. Like, if I didn't wanted to bet, she'd go up and make the bets for me, and or my stepdad would make the bets for me. So it wasn't so much not being allowed in the racetrack, but it was. And as I got older too, we would go. I went to college away from New Jersey, so I wasn't around for a lot of that time. But when we come back, occasionally we'd still go up there. And again, it was just like my mom would pick up the paper. Oh, there's a horse that she liked. Not doing anything Friday night. Let's go up to the Meadowlands. So that's what we did.
So now, what college did you go to?
I went to the University of Maryland in College Park.
Okay.
And I started off, it was going to be a business major, but after the first semester, I had headaches going to economics classes. So I was like, I don't know that this is going to be for me. And they did have a competent, or well-regarded, I should say, school newspaper called the Diamondback. So I went over to their offices to see if I could get see if I could start writing for them. And I was initially I covered intramurals, then I got the women's lacrosse team, which was very good. I think they won a national championship the first year I covered them, and sort of moved up the ladder each year when they were graduating seniors and stuff. And in 1986, after my sophomore year, I was named the sports editor of the paper as the semester came to a close. So that was May. Next month, in June, if you recall this, that Len Bias was drafted by the Boston Celtics on June 17th, and 2 days later he died on campus due to a cocaine overdose. So that was sort of my introduction into hard news slash, this isn't just a Toy Story type of toy department type of job. And instead of just covering games, now we're covering, what happened to Len Bias, the ramifications of the athletic program. There were football coaches leaving, basketball coaches being fired. And it was really sort of my baptism by fire, literally, into the sports world, into sports journalism.
So when did you transition, or how did the transition go to thoroughbred racing? I mean, you, as a kid, you were really going to harness. You probably just followed thoroughbreds just cursory, not, just kind of knowing little things about it. But, when did the transition occur?
So when I was after I got out of college, I started working for a newspaper in Annapolis, Maryland, called The Capital, and I covered a little bit of everything. High schools mostly, did some colleges, did the Orioles, did the at the time the Redskins, some sidebars and stuff. But after a few years in, I was like, I don't know if I want to be necessarily stuck in Annapolis, Maryland. At that time, I was just like, yeah, this is a small paper. I'd like to maybe expand my horizons. So I sent out my resume. Got an interview with a paper called the Trentonian in New Jersey. It was for horse racing, but I was more interested in just getting some feedback on my work. And I met with the publisher, who he more so than the sports editor was the one who wanted to reinvigorate their horse racing coverage. Apparently, there was a time when the Trentonian and the Trenton Times, very competing newspapers, their offices were right 2 blocks away from each other, were big into horse racing. So I went for the interview, again, looking for feedback on my stuff, not so much like I was thinking I was going to get this job. And I was up front with the publisher, a guy named Sandy Schwartz. I said, look, I don't know much about horse racing, but he liked my work. And he said, you'll learn and you'll teach our readers. And so I was like, okay. It was a chance to go back home. My mom and my stepdad were running a business, and I was sort of helping them with that as well. And then I just started covering horse racing. It was right around July. It was July of '91, and my first actually coincided with the Haskell at Monmouth Park. My first assignment was the Haskell at Monmouth Park. I remember I drove to Monmouth on a Monday, and Hansel was the favorite for that race, and Frank Brothers happened to be there. I'm not exactly sure if he was stable there or just had shipped in with the horse. And I went into his office and I said, Mr. Brothers, I know you won the Belmont and I know you won the Preakness, and that's about all I know. And about an hour later, we had a nice talk, nice interview. And about an hour later, I left Monmouth, drove back to my office, and wrote my first horse racing story.
So 91 was the first time you really got involved in writing about horse racing.
Correct.
So now do you like it? Does it start piquing your interest? The characters, the horses, the whole color of, thoroughbred racing in America?
Initially I wanted to be a baseball writer, right? But I remember, so going back and before I went to the Capitol, I was doing some freelance work for a paper called the York Daily Record in York, Pennsylvania, and I was sort of like the secondary Baltimore Orioles reporter, and they only covered the home games, and I basically covered whatever the main guy couldn't cover. And they started out one year 0-21. And it was just like, wow, by Memorial Day, their season's over. I was like, and going, as much fun as it was going to the ballpark, excuse me, you're just like, wow, this game means nothing. And there were so many meaningless games that you're just like, when does this season end? And the days, I remember covering one game on a Saturday night, and it rained, and rain delay. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. We hadn't done anything. We just sat there in the press box watching the rain. Had to come back at noon the next day to finish that game and then do the second regular game. I was like, this is crazy. These are meaningless games, and it's taking a lot of my time. So with the horses, I was like, wow, these are afternoons. I thought it was an afternoon sport. Little did I know the Meadowlands was a nighttime sport. And then I came to find that in racing on Naira, you start in the morning and you end at night sometimes. But I found it interesting. I learned something new all the time. I'm still am. I met some, talk about work ethic. The work ethic of these trainers and the grooms and the hot walkers and the jockeys and exercise riders is off the charts. And I gained an appreciation for that. I every year, every week, there was something new. I went from the Haskell to the Hambletonian to the horse sales. Those are my first 3 assignments when I was started out, and I found it all kind of fascinating. I was like, this is fun. Now, my one thing is I did not know that horse racing was a year-round sport. I figured just like all the other sports that there were seasons, and that I figured, well, I would do horse racing during the season, and then I'd pick up maybe some hockey or college sports in the other part of the year, and then go back to horse racing. Horse racing was my beat, and that's all I did at the Trentonian. And I was like, okay. So that was fine. And there were some cold days at Garden State Park and parks and Meadowlands, but it was fine. I was enjoying it.
Do you know, David, there was a time that racing in New York ended at a certain point in the fall, right? And then reopened at Belmont Park, I don't know, sometime in early May or something. Like there was a real break. There was really a season.
Yeah, that was before me, because when I got to, even when I was covering in New Jersey and watching New York, I knew that there was all this winter racing, the inner track and aqueduct and stuff. And I don't know how much I went out there when I was at the Trenton paper. I was pretty much fixated covering Garden State and parks, sometimes both, because that's when I came to learn about that the sport is not just an afternoon game, because there were racing at night at Garden State. So you could actually go to Philadelphia Park, it was then, cover the races there, and then zip over a half hour or so to Garden State and do the old day-night doubleheader, which I did a few of those. And it was interesting. I do remember one of the first races I covered at Garden State Park. This is one of the things that I've come over the 35 years that I've been doing this. There's still a lot of the same people that were then are still in the game now. For example, Nick Santagata, and he will never remember this, but he rode the favorite in one of the first stakes races I covered at Garden State, and I didn't know how the protocols went. So I interviewed the winner, and then I went in. He was on the beaten favorite, and I went into the jock room to talk to him. And I don't think he liked my questions, and he threw a few orange peels at me. So I kind of laughed at that when I saw that he got the Mike Venezia award the other day. I was like, this wasn't necessarily the best way to act, but I got along with Nick after that. We had a good relationship after that. And I reminded him from time to time about that, but that was 35 years ago. So Nick, Nick Santagata is still valid, still in the game 35 years after he threw orange peels at me in the Garden State Park jocks room.
He's probably the ultimate lunchbox blue collar rider when he rode. Yes. I mean, he rode anywhere. He wasn't beautiful sitting on a horse. And, I was talking about this with my very close friend, Brad Thomas, about Nick Santagata the other day. And just like you said, if you asked him the wrong thing, he would throw orange peels at like that's Nick, him and Brad had many a cursing match, and that was Nick, but he didn't look great on a horse, but he rode.
And he tried. He gave you an effort. If you were betting, you put your $2 on Nick Santagata, you got your money's worth. Whether you got money back or you didn't, you got a ride that you could say, okay, he tried.
It's funny, Dave. You talk about like you started in the early 90s, and you've seen the game from that lens to today. So my lens is from the late mid 60s to today. So I saw the opening and closing of Belmont Park when it would reopen. It was the anticipation, like the anticipation of the NFL season coming in a couple weeks. Correct. Or the beginning of Major League Baseball. Racing does not have a season. You have meets, but it's a all year grind. You also had Saratoga before you got involved full time as a racing rider, a 4-week meet. It was
Right.
5 days a week, 4 weeks.
Yeah,
That was
here's the funny thing about Saratoga. So when I graduated from Trent, when I moved from the Trentonian to the New York Post, which was in '94, my second interview with the editor there, I got an, oh, by the way, like I had accepted the job already, and I was like, okay, so I'm starting. It was right during the middle of the Triple Crown season, believe it or not. And then the last thing he said was two things. One, you have to make 1, 2, 3 picks every day, and I had not handicapped previously. Like, I did some in the 3 years that I was there before. I did some handicapping. I would do the Triple Crown and the Breeders' Cup, make picks and explanations, and write an analysis, if you will. And then he said, you'll have to find a place to live in Saratoga. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And he said, talk to Rick. And Rick Lang was he was the handicapper at the Post at the time. And he said, yeah, he'll help you. And I was like, I got to go somewhere for it was like summer camp, I guess. And it was like, you got to go away the whole summer. And I mean, I was living at home, so I wasn't like leaving my own particular house and got to find someone to watch my house or something. But he said, yeah. And it was like 30 at that point. I think it was 30 or 34 days when the '94 meet. And I was like, I had to go somewhere for the whole meet. And that's when I first kind of learned about Saratoga. I wasn't even, when I first started, I had gone to Saratoga, like for the Trenton paper for big races and stuff, but I never thought I'd be at the meet the whole time. And ever since '94, I've been staying in Saratoga for the summer.
So, you mentioned Rick Lang, and I really liked Rick. He was just a great guy. The press box from when you first started to now, it's like Zombieville. I mean, it's like, back in the day, every seat was packed. I mean, right?
Yeah, well, if you go back to the downstate tracks before even coming up here, you had at least 2 or 3 people from each track or each paper. Newsday had 2 or 3: Paul Moran, John Preachy, Mark Berner. You had the Post was myself and Rick Lang. Daily News, with Bill Finley, and then Jerry Bossert took over, and Sherry Ross was there, and every paper had multiple writers, whether it was a columnist and a handicapper, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. And I've been sitting in the downstate, the Aqueducts, and before it went under reconstruction, the Belmont press box by myself most days for a good decade. When the Post and the Daily News and Newsday sort of cut their racing coverage, it was just me. And there are many days where it's at Aqueduct before we closed down. It was me and the 2 guys, the 2 cameramen. Those were the only people in the press box. On the weekends, you'd get a guy from the Blood Horse, Bob Ehalt, and on big weekends when there's a derby prep in the wintertime or a big stakes race, you get a couple other people. But I'd say a good 80 to 90% of the time. I don't know if you'll remember this, maybe not the listeners here, but there was a commercial for the Maytag repairman, the loneliest job because the Maytag washer and dryers were so good they never broke down. Well, that's me. I was the Maytag repairman in the press box at Aqueduct and Belmont.
It's funny. I sit a few seats away from you, but you're very cynical. Things will come out of your mouth that you probably don't even know they're coming out of your mouth. Like, and I'm listening to you and I'm laughing. Like, I'm laughing because here's this kid from the 90s, now 2026, we're kind of like demented. Like we said, we're kind of, remember Wolfie?
Yes.
Okay.
Richard
Like
McCarthy.
We're like part of Wolfie has gone into our system.
I think I've taken a little bit of everybody in there.
Yeah, right. But the funny thing is, I can't imagine you saying what you say with no audience. At least at least Mike Welsh is above you. I'm to the side. The Equibase guys are to the right. So even though you're entertaining yourself, right? You're entertaining a field of 4, right?
Yeah. It's like those improv nights at the comedy club, like when you're first starting out and you're just sort of testing out material and see what works.
We're all listening, right? And maybe occasionally we'll chime in, right?
Exactly.
it's fantastic. I just can't imagine the sadness and the loneliness of the
Yeah.
stuff coming out of your mouth with no one there.
Yeah, because the camera. Let me tell you, the camera guy down at Aqueduct, he's not listening to what I'm saying. He's got a podcast on of something unrelated, and he just gets up from his chair and goes into the camera well and shoots the race and comes back. So now on Sundays that we do sometimes all watch football. In between races, we're watching football. It's hard for me to get work done on Sundays when in watching a game that you might have money on, or I'm not a fantasy guy, but I'll be watching certain players for my kids' fantasy, watching them, rooting for them. But other than those Sundays, it's usually pretty. It's just me, and there's no audience.
So, Dave, how did you get, and when did you get the job for the Daily Racing Form?
It was at the end of this meet in '98. Steve Christ and his group, who had run the Racing Times, and before that folded, they acquired the Racing Form. And Steve, who knew my work, from the Post, and he approached me in the middle of the Saratoga meet and said, "We're taking over the Form. We'd like you to come on board." And I was like, "Okay, it sounds interesting." He was giving me a lineup of the people that were going to come on board with him. One of them was Jay Pribman, who I'd gotten friendly with. We sat he was working for the New York Times freelance, and I was at the Post, and before that we sat near each other, and we developed a really good friendship. And I thought, and I had utmost respect for Jay and the work he did. And I said, if Jay's going to go to the Form, that's probably a place I'd like to go to as well. And Jay kind of played it close to the vest. He wasn't necessarily 100% that he was going to go, but I kind of assumed that he would. I took a leap of faith that he would, and I was glad that he did, because I learned, I learned a lot from Jay, and really enjoyed working alongside him. He was the main writer in the Triple Crown, and I was sort of the secondary guy there doing sidebars and stuff. And Jay would also do the TV stuff, so I'd fill in when he couldn't, when he was occupied with that. So it was a good lineup that went over there to the Form, and I wanted to be a part of it. So it was the date that I first started my first article, and ironically, I'll bring this up today, was I did a feature on Linda Rice. It ran on September 11th, 1998. And I actually filed a little feature today on Linda Rice, coming off her weekend where she won 5 races on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. So again, it's kind of 28 years later, I'm still writing about the same people.
So Linda Rice, an interesting character, right? You've interviewed her, right?
Yes.
She's a tireless worker. I mean,
correct.
She understands the claiming game. She's all in on winning the title every meet, and even though it's, she doesn't, but she does sometimes. She's and she may do it this year because she's made this tremendous run. Chad Brown's in the lead by a few, but I mean, Linda Rice, I never saw anybody, and you'll kid about it in the press box, always wins an 8-way shake. It's uncanny. It's uncanny. What's your read on Linda Rice? You've interviewed her, because I want to ask you about these certain personalities that people from the outside know, but don't know. You know a lot of these people from your interviews.
Yeah, listen, I agree with what you said. She's a tireless worker. She's very smart. She knows when, in the claiming game, she knows when she made the mistake. She might have claimed a bad horse, and she's on board with, dropping it in class or putting it at a level where it can win, and not kidding herself that, okay, I claimed it for this, I got to win for that or higher. If it looks like it's a bad claim, she doesn't stick with it as long as others might, and keep trying to beat their head against the wall. I'll say this about Linda also. Like Linda, like the rest of them back there, will complain about certain things that go on, but Linda will complain and then do something about it. Whereas the other one, a lot of them just complain. Like, for example, we're getting ready in the wintertime to go to transition to the synthetic surface. Most trainers aren't really on board with that. They're not in favor of going to just all synthetic and no dirt in the wintertime. And Linda's not thrilled about it either. But I'll bet you that by the time we get there, Linda will have claimed a lot of horses off synthetic tracks, either at Presque Isle or wherever, and be ready to go. Whereas others will be like, just kind of hoping against hope whether their horses will handle it or not. I just think she's a really smart trainer with a tireless work ethic and focuses on winning and doesn't focus on a whole lot else.
Yeah, I mean, like as a handicapper, I'm going to be faced with the same situation, handicapping synthetic all winter. And I'm embracing
Right.
it. I'm embracing it rather than complain about it. I'm starting to think about what strategies I'm going to employ to trying to pick winners. Starting pedigrees, studying trainers that have horses like Woodbine guys, like,
Right.
who are successful shipping to other venues and winning. What types of horses win on synthetic? Is there a bias on, Tapeta? Like, trying to embrace like the Turfway meet, what happened there as far as not that it's going to pertain to this meet, but is there a style that wins? Even me wanting to
Right.
claim a horse, I'm thinking about what type of horse I can win with in New York in the winter. I think rather than fight it, figure out how to get the edge.
I agree. And plus, as a handicapper, and I'm sure you've done this for the last couple of years, you've watched the winter product in New York deteriorate over time. Shorter fields, less competitive racing, a lot of horses that you could easily throw out, and the ones that you do throw out and that wind up winning, you still go back and say, well, how did that happen? It's I know it's been pretty chalky at the wintertime, but I just think it's been boring. And I think this has the potential to add a little spark to the winter and a more puzzling and challenging handicapping puzzle. And I think I think it's like you're saying, I'm with you. I think you got to try to embrace it rather than complain about it and do the due diligence. And you'll get little snippets here and there because I'm sure we'll have some synthetic races before we go full time. Whether it's an off the turf race that they're going to definitely use it for, or if they're going to sprinkle in some synthetic races in September, October, November before we get to full blown synthetic. And I think you'll just have to study and learn. And maybe you take it, maybe you sit out a few races to learn, or maybe you just take a shot and then learn from those, whether they're mistakes or not mistakes. But I kind of think you have to handicap it somewhat similar in terms of if you see two speed horses or one speed horse in the race, then you got to assume that just like on dirt or turf, that he's got the edge and he's got the best chance of winning. If you see a ton of speed, you can look for the horse that's got some ability from off the pace. I think you start out there and then you adjust.
Have you been to the new Belmont Park?
I have. I was actually there. What's today? We're doing this on Tuesday. I was there last Thursday. It's not your father's Belmont Park for sure. It's a totally different, it's going to have a totally different look to it. Some will embrace it, some will not. The main thing is that the courses, in addition to a completely new building, you have basically 4 new surfaces. You have the main track is going to look the same. It's a 1.5 mile dirt, but it's been redone. 2 wider turf courses. You won't have that, crossover, those 1.16 races that used to cross over from the outer to the inner turf course. You're not going to have that anymore. You're going to have 2 just fully dedicated turf courses, no chutes. And then you have the inner, inside of the turf course, the inner turf is going to be the Tapeta track, which I haven't seen a lot of that because it is pretty far away. But I was on the apron sort of on last Thursday, and I was watching horses train. And I thought every trainer I spoke to that morning was very complimentary about the surface. And I've yet to hear any negative comments about the new Belmont main track.
What's the
Other than,
building like?
and I wouldn't say this was negative. I'd say it's just, the building is going to be a third of the size of the other one. There's going to be a lot of open space that'll be good outdoor open space in the summer and fall and maybe the spring, depending on weather. The winter, you'll have to be inside. And there's a place called Big Reds, which is like an ode to Secretariat, which will sort of be the sports bar / open space inside, but it's the open area. There'll be handicapping corrals with a lot of TVs. There's plenty of TVs. You won't miss a race. You'll be able to wherever you are, you'll be able to see these races. I think when we first open up, it's going to be the first and second floors. The third and fourth floors are still with the fourth floor, I believe, is going to be the box, the suites, which I'm still not sure that that's going to go over that big. Third floor will be a lot for the owners' boxes. But I think there'll be enough space for the crowds that they'll get, and then the fifth floor, which is where I'm supposed to be with the racing officials, the stewards, the Equibase guys, track announcer. It's definitely much smaller, but it looks. I mean, the views will be spectacular, and and then there's an outdoor area right outside that area, which I don't think they have figured out exactly how they're going to work that yet. But when they do get people up there, I think it would almost be like being on the roof at Saratoga. And I know some people get a chance to go up there. And I think that fifth floor, once they realize how to access it and how to utilize it, when it's nice out, it'll be a really spectacular view, spectacular area to be.
Is there an area for people to come and bring coolers, picnic, kind of like a family, not, like the old Belmont Park, the back was always filled on Mother's Day and, different days. Is there an area for that?
Yes, there's still a good sized backyard. It's not as big as it used to be, but
Right.
for most days it should be ample. And, you're right there. The arena will be right behind you. And again, there'll be ample TVs to watch the races, and then you can go through to. I'm sure you should be able to access the apron to watch the race live if you want. But yeah, there'll be a large enough area in the backyard there. I think the paddock is expanded. It's very big. I think it'll look a little bit empty. It's sort of like the Churchill. I wouldn't say it's like the Churchill. It's bigger in terms of when I say the Churchill, it's just bigger than it used to be, and it'll look empty because the fewer people go to Belmont and even owners as well. But it's going to look kind of cool on TV, and then there's a large viewing. You know how they had the rails outside of the paddock at the old Belmont. They have those as well, and I think even more space on that. Outside the paddock to watch the horses get saddled and walk around before they go to the track.
You going back to like your day or your week. I mean, you do a lot of interviewing. I mean, you interview trainers that have coming in with horses for big races. I mean, so every week you're interviewing people. But let's break down like who were your favorite interviews or people that you interviewed in like from the 1990s. Like let's split it up into your career into two parts.
Mm-hmm.
So the old timers, maybe they passed away, they're retired, but who are a couple of them that really left an impression on you as people and as professional horsemen?
Well, Allen Jerkins would be right at the top of that list. He was a little bit intimidating person for me at first, but getting to know him, he had Devil Is Due one of the first years I was covering racing. I wasn't in New York yet, so I was really in Jersey, but I would come in for his Gotham and the Wood, and even later races when he run at Saratoga. So Allen was someone who I'm glad I got to know as time went on when I did get to New York. Little intimidating, but he knew when I was at his barn that I was there for he knew his horse was live. If I was there to talk to him about a horse for a race, whether it was a Devil Is Due or some other horse, Kelly Kip or what other horse, he felt better about it because going back to the Joe Hirsch at the top, he said that's what Joe would come by and talk to him when he was writing about his horse because he thought the horse was live. So it was just validation to Allen that his horse was well meant in that spot.
When you say
one of my most memorable
question about Allen Jerkins, what was intimidating about him? What intimidated you?
Well, he was a perfectionist, and if you were by the barn and something was not right in the barn, and he got angry at not me, the reporter, but the help, whether it's the exercise rider, whether it was his son Jimmy, who was helping him out, or it was somebody else, and you were like, wow, this might be a bad time, but he could turn that off to okay. He knew he wasn't mad at me, so he would just sort of turn it off and then just sort of like, what do you want? But he said it in a way of like, okay, what's your question? And we'll go on. But watching him, the perfectionist that he was, making sure every step the horse took in around the barn or on the way to the track or on the way back was just perfect. And there's something to be said for that. And there's also something, hey, look, this is a game where perfection is not achievable.
He was my favorite trainer of all time growing up. Like,
I can see that. Oh, yeah.
And I also think he's one of the nicest guys, to his backstretch help, the backstretch. He used to buy every Sunday deli meat and sandwiches, did that a lot. He used to give guys, I wouldn't want to be the wrath of him if you were Noel Winter or some other rider that he threw on.
Right.
And I would say to him, Chief, why did you use Noel Winter on this horse? And he goes, I don't give a shit about the riders. If I have this horse 100%, the rider ain't going to stop it. It's the horse is going to win or lose, by my training. But then the horse, Noel Winter or some other rider would mess it up, and he'd go out to the apron and chase the guy down and wanted to strangle the guy. And you saw the blood vessels in his face, just like his face get red. So like you said, he could be intimidating.
Yeah, no, and I think that might be why he used some of the lesser jocks, because he was like, he wanted it to be, I don't want to say that he wanted it to be about him, but it was about the horse and the way the horse was prepared. And I think he felt, if I have the right horse and I prepare him the right way, you could ride him. And
right.
I don't think that's the way. He didn't want to deal with getting spun. He didn't want to deal with, this or that. It's funny, talk about the Devil is Due thing. Mike Smith rode Devil is Due. And then when it came time for the Cigar Mile or the Naira Mile of 1994, Mike had ridden Cigar in his allowance win in October of 94, which was the first race in that 16 race win streak. Mike had to take off Cigar to ride Devil is Due in the Cigar Mile. Jerry Bailey picked up the mount, and the rest is history for Jerry. He won 15 more in a row on Cigar, but Mike rode Devil is Due, and he finished second to Cigar in the Naira Mile. And I'm sure, one of the reasons might have been Mike was like, well, I can't spin the Chief.
Right. Now go to the second half of your career. Give me a trainer like an Allen Jerkins that really struck you, that will always stay in your mind.
Well, this is kind of an obvious one, but Todd Pletcher, who I first interviewed, and when I was researching for an article I wanted to do when Aqueduct closed, I was doing some research about the 94 Naira Mile and other things, and I landed on a story that I had done the Monday after the Naira Mile, and then also Thunder Gulch had won the Remsen the race before. And so I found an article that I had done on Wayne Lucas. He had won 2-year-old stakes Friday, Saturday, Sunday that weekend. He won all 3 of them. He won 7 stakes for 2-year-olds that meet, between Belmont and Aqueduct. And I had quoted Todd Pletcher that day as an assistant to, because Wayne wasn't there that day. And that was 94. And then 32 years later, I'm still quoting Todd Pletcher. And I'd probably spend more time waiting to talk to Todd Pletcher than almost anything that I've done in racing, because you used to go to the barn at Belmont and he'd be on the phone and you'd have in the office and you'd have to wait for him to come out, but because you always had to talk to him. And now I sort of learned some tricks about when to get him before he goes in the office, before he gets on the phone with an owner or with the help at the other barns that are elsewhere. And it doesn't take as long to get the interview, but the professionalism that Todd has displayed throughout his career. And I did learn some things from Todd as well. And watching him operate and interviewing him as much as I did, I'd have to say, he's right up there.
Now,
The guys I've interviewed.
Okay, I'm going to give you a name of a trainer, and just give me like the first thing that comes to your mind about the trainer, right? Personality, professional,
Okay.
anything. Let's take Chad Brown. What comes to mind?
Yeah, very very professional and very he's pretty straightforward with the horses. When he'll tell you when he's taking a shot versus when he's pretty confident. For example, he's running My Guns Loaded in the Alabama on Saturday, and he understands that he's taking a shot here. Like, he thinks she's a good filly. He just has no real feel whether she's going to be a 1.25 mile filly. But he feels, he's not out of bounds by taking a shot here. But I think he's equally anxious to find out how far she wants to go. But he knows she has talent. And when I do my 2-year-old story, he's very forthcoming with me on that Libby Lloyd that won the other day. He was one that he had kind of said, yeah, this is one of my better ones. So when I do my 2-year-old story, he's very forthcoming.
Okay, another one. Just one more, couple words, just so
Okay.
come to mind. Mark Cassie.
Welcoming an opinion. It's a conversation, not just an interview. Like, well, I'll talk to him, and then he'll ask me some questions, and it's a back and forth that I like. I find that if he respects your opinion, that's pretty cool.
Steve Asmussen.
Steve, on the record, is a little bit bland. Off the record, he does provide some background on things.
Okay. I'm going to just throw out like a guy that's, you probably interviewed him, or it's a blue collar guy. Okay.
Right.
Ilkay Cantamarcy.
I've had a few interviews with Ilkay for stuff that I've run in the wintertime, and he's pretty forthcoming too with his, he'll give you good reasons why he's taking a shot in a stakes race where you look at it and say, you wonder why he's doing it. And he'll give you some good reasons.
I had a show, I interviewed him in Merktan.
Mm-hmm.
And Merktan is having a really good meet.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, Merktan, not 100% sure why I know he stepped away for the year.
He needed a break. He simply
that's what he said.
Break.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Nothing more than
I wasn't sure if that was actually right, but that was
no. It's
that's
true.
what he said.
It's true.
And I had to
it's true.
Okay.
Cherie DeVoe.
I've known Cherie during the time that she was working for Chad, and I knew she would be successful. I didn't know she would be successful this fast. And I know it did take a year for her to win her first race, but she was a good horse person and very savvy, bit demanding, but very smart.
Jeremiah Englehart.
Fun-loving guy. Family first, I'd say. If he was a family first guy and his stable was a stable grew, he had to balance that out, and I think he found the proper balance.
Rick Dutrow.
As good a horseman as I've ever seen. Gets a bum rap for some of the things that he had done, but I think he's almost part horse.
I think it was one of the greatest injustices to put him away for 10 years.
I agree wholeheartedly. He probably deserved a penalty, not 10 years.
Right. Bob Baffert.
Very smart. Doesn't always want to let you know how smart he is.
Okay.
Likes the role of, the sort of the playing the, the comedian type thing, but he knows he's sharp.
Um, Flavian Pratt.
We've developed a pretty good rapport over the past few years. I think he was a little leery of me when we first started, but as he got more comfortable, I thought he's a good interview. He's a straight shooter. You ask him what happened in a race when he got beat, he'll give it to you, and he'll also give you some good insight when he, as far as getting the job done. And I actually liken him a bit to Jerry Bailey. I think his skill set is not only knowing what his horse and what he can do, but what his more importantly, or what I thought separated Bailey from everybody else, was he knew what his opponents were going to do. He learned the tendencies of his fellow riders, and I think that made him a better rider.
I'm going to give you a name of a rider, and I think he's first class. My opinion, just a tremendous human being. I'd like to know your opinion. Manny Franco.
Yeah, no, I think he's a very good person and a very talented rider. And I'm happy that he's doing as well as he is this meet, because last year at this time he didn't have a very good meet. And I wonder if maybe going back, not that it still has an effect on him, but going back several years when he got taken off Tis the Law, I wonder how that impacted him emotionally for a little bit of time there. But he's rebounded for many years now, and he's been a very solid grade A rider.
Give me the list of like the top 5 horses in Dave Grenig's career that are just in, your personal Hall of Fame that you just loved.
Well, the funny thing is, one of the first races that I remember covering was the Breeders' Cup in '91. So I'm about now 4 months into this whole covering racing. And at the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, when Arazi goes from last to first and wins going away and gallops out like a freight train, I said to someone who I knew, or sort of knew, I said, "Is that normal? Like, is that what we just saw? Is that normal?" And he goes, no, not for a 2-year-old. It was a 14-horse field, and I still, the Arazi runs right by him still echoes in my head from Tom Durkin. Holy Bull was, I just loved Holy Bull, the style that he employed. I'm going to go to the front. I'm going to go as fast as I can, and if you can run with me, fine. If you can't, I'm going to beat you. Along that same line, I kind of fell for a horse when I was covering Jersey racing, and he came up here, and I saw all his races up here. To Hare, as a juvenile, the 3 races that he won up here in Saratoga, I thought those was phenomenal. He didn't go on to become much at 3, but I thought his 2-year-old year was pretty spectacular. I thought Rachel Alexandra, her Woodward here, the building shook. I thought the place might come down. The way that she won that race, and the campaign that she had that year as her 3-year-old filly, the way she beat the boys 3 times and just devastated the female horses. I guess I'd have to put Curlin on that list to win the two-time Jockey Club 2 times. That whole 3-year-old crop was pretty impressive. I know he got beat by Rags to Riches in a great Belmont Stakes. Rags to Riches that day was just phenomenal, and Curlin just missed out by the bob of a head there. But he had a great 3- and 4-year-old season. It's hard to not include Cigar in that list, just because of I never to win 16 in a row, and I remember going to California for leaving Saratoga and flying to California to cover the Pacific Classic, this is the 30th anniversary of that, him getting beat in the Pacific Classic. But it was a memorable run. I got to go to a lot. I didn't go to Dubai, but I got to go to a lot of places. Arlington Park for the first time, Suffolk Downs for the first time. It was kind of cool to follow that campaign.
Bill Mott. I wanted to add him into that trainer list.
Bill is it depends what day. There'll be times when you go and he just doesn't have time for you, and there'll be times when you want to go, but he's keeping you there. I remember at the beginning of the meet, he took me on a barn tour. Went through both the barn. He was showing me every horse in the barn, and I was like, and I thought to myself, this is great. And then the other part of me thought, I'm going to blow deadline big time here because I got to go. But it was enjoyable to have him go through the horses. When he's in a good mood, there's almost nobody better to talk to.
Now I want to transition to, amongst your other jobs, this tireless worker, right, that you are, you do the Clockers report with Mike Welsh, correct? You do this
Correct.
for,
Yeah, there's Mike Welsh and Don Harris, who's our main guy on the Oklahoma side. But I do assist those two guys when I can.
and so this Clockers report sells, I know, at the Daily Racing Form, right?
Right.
Now, tell me how that works, the mechanics of the three of you doing when there's 100 horses on the track, or like, even 50 horses on the track.
Right.
How the hell do you do that?
It's an interesting dynamic especially on a Saturday or Sunday when they break it down into a couple of breaks so that at 7 o'clock the track is open for only workers. You can only the horses on that were working are going to be on the track, and there's like a 10 or 15 minute window when it's just breezers. And we have on the main track side, Donald will come over from the Oklahoma side. Mike is in there from the beginning of the day to the end of the clocking time, and I kind of bounce back and forth. But we kind of call out who we have. Those guys have 2 watches going. I find that I'm really only effective with 1 watch at a time, to be honest with you. So I get maybe a half as many horses as they do. But we're just calling out who we have, and then we have to go back and listen to we put it on tape, and we listen to, so we know who has who, what the markings are, so we can confirm that it's the horses that were given, and then we put pen to paper or computer key to paper, if you will, and write up the reports. We grade them. We give information on the time, the fractions. You look at a horse that works in 47. If he goes 22, 25, is not as good a work as 25, 27. If they go off at 25 and come home in 22, something like that, just, for argument's sake here. I think our descriptions of the workouts is what's valuable here. Not so much even the grade that they get. It's a little bit about how the work was done. I like to include who they worked with, what that horse did, whether out of that work he had a race, or what he's done previously, or let people know that he worked with an unraced horse, or a 2-year-old might have worked with an older horse, or whatever. I just think it's I think it's valuable information that is part of the handicapping, to help solve the handicapping puzzle.
So if this, what would you say is the percentage of the amount of horses you actually, the three of you, clock on a very busy day? I mean, do you get a third of them?
No, I think we get, I'd say we get two-thirds or more of them.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think even more so. Donald does a terrific job on, by himself on the Oklahoma side. We all do turf as well, but there's 2 turf days on Fridays and Sundays, and you'll get upwards of 70 horses on the turf, which are separated. They're parsed out, 3 sets. There's 10-10, 10-20, 10-40. And with all 3 of us there, we can get pretty much every horse. Get a little backup with XP TV sometimes if you miss one, or want to go back and look at a video of a work and just sort of double check what you think. Some of those works are up there, so you can sort of get a refresher. But I'd say we get at least, I'd say we get more than 2/3 of the works. Now, listen, we're all at Saratoga. If you see a horse, sometimes his horses are training at Belmont at this time. We don't have anybody at Belmont, so those horses probably won't have any reports from recent workouts. But we were there up until, say, July 1st. So any workouts that they have in June, if it's a first-time starter, we can give some information, even though it's going back to June. But as far as the workouts that take place in Saratoga, I'd say we over more than 2/3. I'd say 80%.
What's the last A+ work you gave to a horse? A+, because it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever. Yeah, I don't think I've given one. I can't remember. There was definitely an A work for a horse that was racing downstate. I can't remember the name of it. I wish I could remember the name of the horse, but it's very hard, because you're almost, if you're giving an A work, you're almost trying to guarantee that it's going to win, which is it's probably not the way to approach it, because you can't a work is a work. It could be a flawless work. A lot of it, the work, and that's another part of the workouts report that I think is important is, you can't just look at the half mile time, because a lot of guys, most notably Todd and Chad, they gallop out past the wire. And like, for example, I'll give you an example. Oselli the other day, and I know everyone knows who Oselli is, and he hasn't won a race, but he had a half mile work, and he didn't get pulled up until almost the 3/8 pole. He just galloped out like a train. I don't know what he's probably had some good works like that, but he still hasn't won a race, but he still made it. If you're the connections, you're like, oh, he's made 800,000. If you're betting on him to win, you haven't made a penny, but he's worked, that work the other day. I'd be surprised if he didn't go in the Travers off that work, because it was fabulous. It really was. That's got to be close to an A type of work.
Have you clocked him in other works?
I remember clocking him at Churchill and not being as impressed as I was here the other day. And he's coming off a terrible race. He's coming off a really...
Well, from what Beckman told me, he knew right away from the condition of the track that he wasn't going to handle the track. What confuses me is that, Whit Beckman scored with a horse on the turf Sunday, I think, at 2 turns.
Yes, let him know.
And, the work on the turf was like in 51-3. And he described it as a very good work. And when I look at 51-3, unless there's something that he said it was a good work. Did you see the work?
I don't recall seeing that work, but I was actually talking about it with him this morning, and he had said that the clockers had told him it was a good work. And I think what happens is, so another thing about the workouts, going back to the turf. So the first set of turf works are usually the stakes horses, and they get to work inside the cones, the orange cones that they put up in the middle of the racetrack to sort of like not make sure that every horse goes over the same parcel of land, if you will. So the stakes horses get to go on the inside part. So their times are going to be a little bit faster because they're covering less ground. A horse like the maiden, let him know he's going to go around the dogs, those orange cones. So he's got to travel a longer distance. So by that fact alone, he's going to the works are usually going to be slower outside of those cones versus inside.
Right.
So, and then, again, they could break off slow. Let's say they go in 14-3 and he comes home in 37 outside the dogs, outside of another horse. That's pretty good. And then they gallop out, pretty strong as well. So that's where the workout report, I think, comes in handy, because instead of just looking at a time 51-3, you'll get a description. You should be able to get a description of how the work was done. And I think that's the information that's key to the workout report. Was
that work in your publication?
I believe it was. I just didn't do it. It wasn't my Do you
remember do you remember the grading it got?
I don't.
Okay. But I think what you do, what the three of you do, amongst everything else you do, is unbelievable work ethic, and I see it firsthand. I go the other day, I'm in the backstretch and you're interviewing Baffert for a half an hour, and it's like your day has to start when it starts at 6:30, 7 in the morning. Earlier.
Yeah, it kind of depends if I know what's happening. Sometimes, on the Oklahoma training track, when Steve was Asmussen was working magnitude, it was usually, the second set, which would have been like 550. So I made sure I was out there to see all those works, which didn't do me any good because I thought he worked really well. He didn't run any good. And then, so it kind of varies. No later than 7 in terms of being get over to the main track side to watch that after the break, but usually earlier than that. And then I try to sneak in a few interviews in between once that first rush is over, I'll get in my golf cart and run over to see who I need to see, and then try and get back for the 8:45, the second round of freshly, the track when the track reopens. That morning I was talking to Bob about Explora, but also trying to get some information on any of the horses that he might be bringing here. And unfortunately, I was going to change his mind, and he told me he was going to run a horse in the Alabama, and obviously she didn't enter the race. So some of that will be on the editing room floor, if you will.
So, I didn't want to start the show with this because I really wanted to trace your career, from the beginning. But it's important we address in this final segment of the interview the craziness of the last 2 weeks in the industry, the craziness of the scores at Monmouth and Saratoga last weekend, and what has transpired since then. I cursory go through Twitter. I don't like it because I don't know what to believe now. I don't know, fact or fiction. But has there been anything discovered with these two guys that came, one guy at Monmouth, one guy at Saratoga? Anything come about that you've discovered in the last few days?
Not recently. I mean, it was pretty much condensed to what happened last week when they did put out a HISA, I guess, or HIWU, the sort of the drug enforcement law arm of HISA, had mentioned, did put out something that Angel Quiroz, one of the trainers involved in this, the Fair Hill Five, if you will, had a horse test positive for albuterol, which is like a bronchodilator, but not on one of the horses that was involved in those races on the 8th of August. It was a different horse coming off a long layoff. It was sort of fit the profile of the other horses. It was trying to get off the vet's list and did a workout at Fair Hill, and every horse that works for the vet to get off a list undergoes a test, and the horse tested positive for that medication. Doesn't necessarily mean that those other horses were also on that medication. We'll find out hopefully in the coming days or weeks. It seemed like there was the betting on that was really done overseas in England, not so much in the U.S. And I don't think there was really any kind of betting coup in Saratoga per se. Those horses, I don't think were part of any, wow, look at that win payoff and then look at the exactas or whatever. I don't recall that being the case. Whereas the Monmouth, the daily double, was extremely short. So,
yeah,
but nothing totally new yet on them.
Well, if
very short.
I wouldn't have enjoyed, I would have loved to see what came out of your mouth if you had bet that double, right? And found out the payoff, right? I really wonder, what, curse words would have exploded out of your mouth.
But the funny thing is, so at the race in Saratoga, the second race that Ochoa won, Mike Welsh had liked that horse because he had seen the horse train in Florida, and the trainer who had him originally was not a high percentage guy, and the horse was claimed off that trainer, and Mike remembers seeing some workouts for the horse, maybe not knowing exactly who was training it so much, or maybe he did, but they had some good workouts on that horse going back a while, and he was like, this horse might be okay, and the horse, he didn't bet the first one, but I believe he bet the second one, and based on that, not on anything that was floating out there, and before anybody knew that there was some kind of thing going on. So that horse, the second one there, was liked on just the way he had trained down in Florida prior to this, but obviously no one had seen the Fairhill works, and no one knew who was actually doing the training. The thing about that, you talk about if there any new information. When I looked into that horse that had won, one of the horses that had won, it was claimed by Jose D'Angelo, and D'Angelo told me that the horse had a splint bone injury, and he actually showed me a picture of it the other day. Says, yeah, we claimed this horse, and he had an injury. You could see the thickness in the bone, and the horse went through a digital sale and then was bought by somebody else, this group here, and then I guess they, the bone, those splint bones heal fairly, in a reasonable amount of time, and then they went on and did what they did, and the horse won. And I don't know what's going to come of. It'll be interesting to see if there's anything that comes out of the horses that ran here in Saratoga.
You know what I pointed out that and I thought about it like in the middle of my sleep at 3 a.m. I woke up. And that's how demented I am, in this, from this game. But but what came to my mind was, how the hell did they find five races? Now, three at Saratoga, one lost. One got left. Remember, lunged at
Correct.
the start, ran fourth. How did they have
Yep.
five races within 2 hours in the condition book, and that written for these horses perfectly? Like that to me, answer that.
Yeah,
Crazy.
that's tough to answer.
That it's
Because you almost, if there was a big betting conspiracy, you would have, well, the racing offices are in on it, right? That's why I don't necessarily. I think you enter these races so far out. I think the conspiracy sort of was hatched by, hey, look at this, we got all these horses in. How do we monetize this? I think they hatched it after the horses got in, because who knows? Let's say the one at Saratoga might have been carried over to the Wednesday, right? Because it might have been an extra. We didn't have enough horses to fill, so that race got carried over Wednesday. The fact that all those horses came out on the same day, it's
I
people are going to laugh at this, but I think
I,
it was a lot coincidental.
I have to agree, but if there's no drugs involved and it was actually a mastermind plan that involved multiple peoples that started in Venezuela, right? Or like I was even thinking about like Jason Service and the other clown meeting in a diner to start this plan. They need
Right.
money and it starts from a diner,
Right.
right? Like I want to produce that
Yeah.
Netflix special. Okay. That I want to produce that 4-part series. I mean, it's
Well,
tremendous if it was
and it is, and to be honest with you, when I say that these races were drawn so far out, actually, it's the shortest time. Those races were on a Sunday. It's the shortest time frame that actually New York has. The races were drawn Wednesday for
right.
Sunday. So you see, the PPs don't come out to Wednesday night. They're looking at a Thursday, and I think the same is true for Monmouth. I think they draw their races
Right. Right.
Sunday on Wednesday. So there was
Yeah.
even a less period of time, as opposed to like today's Monday. We already know the races on
I
Saturday.
know.
You have a
Yeah.
lot longer time frame to sort of put together something.
And the conditions fit the horses like a glove. And
Exactly.
it's it's tremendous. It's tremendous.
It
Now,
really is.
and I
It is a
and I
movie. It is a
actually
movie.
hope that it was done with no drugs. It was just a master plan, because if they did, they deserve to take down millions, right? And I applaud them for that. Right. But
I
now
do. I agree.
today news broke that a economics professor at Memphis University named Marshall Gramm, who I don't know him personally, but I know him. Okay. I never met him, but I feel like I know him really well. 10 strike stable, big better, big contest player. Okay. Extremely intelligent. Uh, you break the news in the daily racing form that he was able to access information from the HISA portal as a owner. Like I am an owner, I can go into
Right.
HISA and get. I mean, I don't go into it, but it seems like I can go into it and look at all the medication history of the horses I own, right?
Correct.
But I did not know that he was able to go into the database and access the vet reports for any horse that he wanted. The question I have for you, okay, so he created PPs with this information in his PPs, claimed horses with this information at his disposal, bet on horses, played contest with this information. Now he claims from your interview that he's going to vigorously defend himself in the HISA proceedings, but the information at issue was available through his authorized HISA account. It was a large database at the time that he accessed it. It had not, he had not reviewed its contents or understood the scope of the information it contained. That you wrote that. He used his own account and credentials and never attempted to conceal his identity. He logged into it and he bypassed no security protocols or other safeguards to access this information. The question is was this a flaw in the system that was, or is it not a flaw and anyone could go in through your credentials and access the information that he accessed?
Well, they had a press, before I came on with you, there was a press conference that HISA CEO Lisa Lazarus had held with some reporters, and she said that it wasn't just being able to access it through his account. He had to come up with a different program, a different code to be able to go and do hundreds of horses to look at their record. So that's where the discrepancy sort of is right now. He's saying I just went on with my regular coding and my regular access information, login, PIN, and was able to look at everything. And Heis is saying that's not the case. And that one of the things they said is that he was on a conference call right around the morning. I don't know the exact date that he was notified of all this, but he was notified later in the day. Lisa Lazarus said that morning he took part of a conference call that had members of the Jockey Club and HISA about talking about, do we need to change our practices? And she said that he was on that call, was giving ideas, but never once acknowledged that he was the reason that they were having this conference call in the first place. That it was his manipulation of the system that got into that led him to this information. And it's all first came to light with around Belmont time when Deterministic's PPs and Griffin's Wharf's PPs were posted on social media with dates of when they got shockwave therapy. And people were like, how did this come out? And HISA did an investigation, needed help from a cyber security company, and it all landed on Marshall, who admitted to the HISA investigators that he did access this information. But now he's telling a story about it was easily accessible to me. I didn't violate any rules. And I think that's he's got it in September. He's going to have two hearings, one on the 14th and one on the 16th for a couple of different charges and defend himself. And we'll see actually how that goes. But they're seeking to ban him from the sport from at least an ownership standpoint. He claimed 9 horses during that time frame that he had access to this. And they're trying to seek restitution from him for any purse money that was earned, which they said was $80,000 to $90,000. They're going to HISA is going to reimburse those owners that that anything that they can prove that he earned money, any horses that earned money, and then via legal proceedings, they're going to seek to get reimbursed from Marshall for that money. And we'll see how it plays out. This is sort of just the start of this in terms, or it's the next step in it. We all, everyone sort of saw these PPs back in June. Both horses ran on Belmont Day. Deterministic won the Manhattan. Griffin's Wharf was nowhere in an allowance race. I'm not exactly sure why those two horses PPs were the ones that showed up, but that's how it happened.
Has anybody seen PPs with more extensive information on it? I mean, you're talking just shockwave therapy, but
right.
There's, I get a vet bill every month. There's tons of things that you could see,
I'm sure injections. Yeah, I'm sure injections were probably on some of those PPs. I haven't seen them other than just those two PPs, which that was about a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago now, really. It was 2 months ago that those things were floating around out there. But I'm sure they have, and they weren't, I don't think they were full PPs. I think they were just the last 10 or 12 starts. And, they showed more of the recency in terms of injections and shockwave.
Do you think this information should be available to the public, or some of it, because I know in Japan PPs, there's a lot more information available to the betting public than what we get here, right? So because we're betting, shouldn't we have information? I'm not saying about the amounts of, of a medication picograms or something or whatever, but
Right.
something important to know should be disclosed to the betting public in your PPs.
Listen, I think information is vital to the horse player, and I think anything that they can get that would help them to make a decision on how to play a race is important. I don't know. How do you know what shockwave therapy is? Uh, Deterministics won seven in a row on grass. Is it because he got shockwave therapy, or is it because he's just a good horse? Griffin's Wharf got, say, shockwave therapy and was nowhere in the two races since then. The claims that I looked at a couple of the horses briefly that Marshall claimed with this information, and one of them has 2 wins, a second, and a sixth from 4 starts, and another one is 0 for 3, beaten double digits
Right.
in the start. So it's no absolute, but it is another piece of information that I guess would be helpful. I just don't know. It's a tough question for me to say definitively whether that information should be there or not.
Well, he's a gambler. He's a huge better,
Yeah.
and I would want to see like Trace's bets on and correlate it with the information. See how much money he actually scored out on based on the information. I mean, look, maybe there was a flaw in the system at HISA that maybe I could have accessed something. Who knows? I don't know. But if he actually wrote code and actually intentionally, because he's a computer science guy.
Yeah, and I think he did. I don't think if I'm taking on face value what was said by HISA and what was said in that was a text that Marshall sent to a bunch of us, people who were inquiring. I don't know. I'd have to think that HISA putting themselves out there in the public eye and talking about this whole situation. And she even said, Lisa Lazarus even said, look, they were working on a settlement agreement in some sort. And she said those agreements broke down because Marshall wanted to conceal certain information. And HISA said, that's a no-go. We're going to explain to the public what happened here. And I credit HISA and Lisa Lazarus in that case for doing so. I hope what they told us is all accurate and truthful. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out once they have these hearings, which I don't know if they're open or not. I'm going to say they're not, but transcripts of them probably will be made available at some point. And again, those hearings are the 14th and the 16th of September. So it'll be interesting to see how they read when they're done.
So, David, you've been married a long time. You have kids, right?
I do have 2 kids.
Okay, and they're in college?
My daughter graduated college. She's out in the workforce, and my son is going to a senior year at LIU in Brookville, New York.
How hard is it to juggle your life as a father, a husband, with your profession? Like, have you figured out how to do it, or do you continue working on that? I know I figured it out at 63 years old. I'm 69 now. So it took me 63 years and 39 years in the business as a professional. Have you done it, or do you continue to work on that?
Yeah, I haven't figured it out the proper way to do it. Like I said before, going back to even 30 years, I never thought I would have to spend my summers up here for the whole summer, and it got longer as we went along. I mean, we're up here for 10 weeks this year, and I will go down, or I have gone down sometimes to see them. And my wife was just here on this weekend, and she left this morning. It was her second visit up, but I don't get to see. No, I never really figured it out. I remember traveling the day Sandy hit. I was going to the Superstorm Sandy, and my son was playing in the Little League game that morning, like to try and get. It was like the championship game, and then I was flying out that afternoon, and I got to see a little bit of the game, but then I had to leave. Like the trainers, and they've talked about this. You miss certain things based on when certain times of year, like every May, I haven't been home except for the COVID year. I've been away the last week of April, first week of May for 30 years. Up here, I'm away a lot of the time. Sometimes they're here, sometimes they're not. and then in the fall to the Breeders' Cup. So and we haven't had a Breeders' Cup in New York since in 22 years. I told them, it's funny, I told my family, I said, you're going to be sick and tired of seeing me next year. I said, Saratoga is going to be only 8 weeks, and the Breeders' Cup's in New York. I'll be home all the time. And they kind of laughed. But no, I definitely did not figure out a great way to balance home, work and family life. Try to take they're not that big into the track, even though I met my wife at the racetrack. Her interest has waned over time, and I brought my kids out sometimes to the racetrack with me when I had to work when they were really young, but they never really gravitated to it that much.
What does Dave Grening love to do when you want to shut it down completely? Like what is just something that you just enjoy?
I'm a big hockey fan. I like, my daughter and I are both Rangers fans. My son went the other way and is an Islanders fans, but I do take him to some of the Islander games, even before they played at Belmont Park. So I wasn't always tied into racing, but I enjoyed going to the hockey games with my daughter. And we had a partial season ticket plan. We didn't renew it this year, but I enjoy going to sporting events with them, and if go out to dinner and to shows with my wife, and at times.
Do you like to watch any series, like any,
I'm a terrible TV person. I pretty much watch Law and Order SVU reruns when I'm not watching a sporting event on TV. I'll just be watching SVU reruns all the time, maybe mixed in with a little 2.5 Men for the levity of to try and laugh.
Well, during this meet, me and my wife are rewatching The Sopranos.
Okay.
And I love it even more. I love it even more the third time around, But I really appreciate your time. I know this was like my longest interview ever, but it was also, you're somebody I've always respected greatly, and your knowledge, your hard work. You're just, we both lost some friends in this industry. One being Dave Litvin.
Yeah.
You worked right next to Dave for many years, and I grew up with Dave as a kid. These are people that are just a lasting impression on us, and
well, people like Rick Lang and Dave Litvin, who are the handicappers that I learned the most from, really shaped a lot of how I handicap and what to look for in past performances and horses and trainers' styles. Going back to Rick for a second, when I was going back to that story I told earlier about having to make 1, 2, 3 picks, we would have to make for the New York Post when I never really handicapped before. I had to make picks on Finger Lakes races one day a week. When we were racing 6 days, I would have to make Finger Lakes picks on Tuesdays, and then we went to 5 days. I had to go Mondays and Tuesdays. And Rick just gave me 3 keys. He said he would give me a couple of trainers like Ed Clouston and Charlie Baker and Purdue and the Engleharts. And then he said, and when in doubt, just pick whoever John Grabowski was riding. So that helped. And then Dave, Dave was a methodical handicapper along the lines of Allen Jerkins in terms of being a perfectionist. And I learned a lot from Dave and watching races and understanding trips and stuff like that. And he was just a real good. Our families were close early on. They lived in Center Reach, Robin and Dave, and we were in Merrick. We visit time to time. And going back to TV shows, on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, there would be like odd couple marathons, and him and I would just be, he might not come out and I might be at the track and he might have stayed home, and we'd just be texting back. We'd be watching the odd couple in between races and just be texting back lines like, tell me about your career, slugger. And I don't like juice, pits in my juice.
We lived together, right, for a long time, like growing up.
Right.
And I was Walter Matthau, and he was Jack Lemmon. Really. I mean, really. He was the perfectionist, the clean one, everything organized. Right. Do you know he had one of the greatest comic book collections of all time?
Did he really?
Oh, yeah. And we were brokesters, and we took it to Coney Island and sold my collection was not nearly as good as his. His was labeled like he had Marvel. He had like Superman #1, 2, 3. I mean, it was crazy. But he had them in plastic folders, and you couldn't crease them. They were perfectly, they were pristine. Mine were like beer stains and all kinds of shit, right? And like he was the ultimate perfectionist in everything he did. And
Yeah, I agree.
and his comic book collection attested to that. And we'd both be millionaires if we never sold that collection. I mean,
Sure.
we sold it for pennies on the dollar. I mean, as brokesters, gamblers,
To get
as
some gambling
15
money,
years.
right?
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly. Well, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate, your time and who you are as a person and a professional.
Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thank you.